Welcome to the opening line report. I am TommyFreezePops, and we are back to look ahead at week 8 of the NFL season. Your first look at the betting lines, all the odds for the slate next week. We have it for you right here. The best analysis in the business. Sunday Night Football is a wrap, folks. It's a blowout. Well, not really a blowout, but it got out of hand here late. 31-17. The Eagles take care of business, and if they weren't trying to run some clock here, I'm sure they could punch it in here again for another score. So a fun game, but the Eagles showing that they are the team that played in the Super Bowl last year, not Miami. They still got to earn their stripes. Their first game against a good team, Miami, and they didn't get it done. So, well, I guess the Bills are a good team, but we'll talk about the Bills here a little bit. Let me add my guys here to the stream. We have my man Stu. We have my man Albert. We are going to get things rolling here. Let's dive right into the action with Thursday Night Football. The Jaguars. Sorry, not Thursday Night Football. Wait, is this Thursday Night Football again? Am I crazy? Jag playing back-to-back Thursday night games. I'm going to have to check the schedule again. They are 1.5-point favorites at Pittsburgh. The money line has Jacksonville at -130 and the Steelers at +110. The total at 41.5. And look, the Pittsburgh Steelers got things done in LA today. They won 24-17. They moved to 4-2 on the year after a disappointing start to the season. Jacksonville has gotten things going in the right direction as well. 5-2. They took care of business against New Orleans on Thursday night this past week. So, AC, why don't we start with you here? What's your lean here as the Steelers try and keep the good times rolling here against the Jags, who have kind of figured it out?
No, first of all, thank you for having us on, Tommy. Congratulations, 1-year anniversary. Everyone give him a round of applause for that.
Thank you.
There you go. But so one of the principles I have when it comes to handicapping is I don't like short favorites, especially on the road. I think it's a little trappy. But with that being said, I actually like Jacksonville in this game. I think it opened up at -1. It's already reacted to 1.5. It might jump even further. I think Jacksonville had a crazy stretch there. They played 4 games in 19 days, right? 2 in London and then 2 back here in short rest. Somehow I was against Jacksonville this past week. They covered. And they're starting to impress me. They're starting to roll like they did at the second half of last season. I think it took them Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson and the rest of the team to finally get into midseason form, and I think they are there. Pittsburgh's coming off a really nice win on the road there against the Rams, so it's a great spot for Jacksonville. So my initial lean is Jacksonville -1.5.
Yeah, this is going to be a good one right here. I mean, a lot of people say styles make fights. This is a very interesting mix of a finesse team versus a real gritty, tough team. And for me, I normally like to be on the real gritty, tough team. The problem is this Steelers record is fake as hell, man. Oh my God. I mean, you look at it and you might think, oh, this is a legitimately good team with playoff contention, right? Same with my Commanders, who were 3-3 earlier. But as we know, records lie. I don't believe the Steelers team is anywhere close to where the market is setting them right now. Their offense, I still don't really believe in. Kenny Pickett obviously did have a good performance today. And the defense has been the parts that's underwhelmed me a little bit. I mean, obviously, TJ Watt in the middle is a phenomenal game-breaking player. I kind of expected them to be in that top 3 to top 5 range. Not to say they're a bad defense. Secondary's been playing a little bit better recently. But overall, I like this Jacksonville side a little bit more. Like you guys mentioned, obviously, they're putting the pieces together. They're looking a little bit more comfortable, getting a little healthier. Hopefully, they get Campbell back in the secondary, who just missed last game right there. For me, I think I'd be on Pittsburgh if maybe this was a 3-point spread or a 4-point spread. But to me, it just doesn't feel right. It feels like the market is overvaluing Pittsburgh. So for that reason, and as you guys know, I don't love Jacksonville. I've been kind of against them for most of the season, but I think this is overall a good buy spot.
Just to clean up something from just a minute ago, Buffalo playing Tampa on Thursday Night Football in a few days here. And just a quick note on Buffalo. I think they stink. I think they kind of stink. Ooh. They're not who we thought they were. To lose to the Patriots, period, on top of the weird game they had with the Giants. They haven't looked like the Bills of early season this year and the Bills of late over the last few years in the past 3-4 weeks. They just haven't. So I've got my antennas up on Buffalo. And the reason why I thought the Jaguars Pittsburgh game was Thursday Night Football is I originally had Bills Bucks as one of our marquee games to hit on, but they played themselves out of the marquee this week. So I am down on the Bills. I am not going to bet on the Bucks to beat the Bills on Thursday, but I would not be too high on them for a deep playoff run this year. Anyone have a quick thought on the Bills here before we move on to our next game?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say it's kind of similar to the same point I just made a second ago of styles make fights, right? For me, I don't think the Bills necessarily, as a finesse team, I don't think they win these gritty games. And I know you're like, what, a finesse team? They're outdoors. This is a dome team that plays outdoors. I know Buffalo's a gritty city, and I know we'd like to think this is a really gritty team, but I don't see that, to be honest. I see this as a team that can win against the Chiefs, the Bengals, but when you give them a Jets, when you give them a Patriots, when you ask them to make the game disgusting and kind of win in the weeds, that's when things get a little bit nasty. And that's what makes them such an interesting wild card. Because like you said, they've looked truly awful these last 2 weeks. And as a Bills believer, right, it's a little bit tough. I mean, Matt Milano going down at linebacker is tough. White going down once again at cornerback is tough. I think they're going to have to make some adjustments on defense. But at the end of the day, they have a game-breaking quarterback, and not too many teams can say that. So I still think they're in the Super Bowl hunt. It just depends on the matchup.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Stu, and I would say to piggyback on that, Buffalo, if they have the mindset to be that, right, to be the gritty, to lean on their running game, to lean on that offensive line and that 260-pound quarterback, they are a really tough team to beat, and they are one of the elite teams. It's when they get pretty and they try to win pretty, that's when Josh Allen starts turning the ball over, things like that. So I agree wholeheartedly with Stu. I think talent-wise, they're up there, right, from a roster standpoint, but they just don't have the mindset to really wear down folks. And I think they're built that way. They just don't want to win that way.
Muted.
Good call. Let's talk about a team that's been disappointing this season that eliminated the Bills last postseason. The Bengals, 6-point dogs heading to San Francisco, who has looked like the best team in the NFL this season. Obviously, Brock Purdy getting his first career loss last week, but they play on Monday Night Football against the Vikings here. They're slightly banged up, right? So we're going to see how the Niners look tomorrow night. So that's probably going to impact this line quite a bit if the Niners come out and just don't look like the Niners with all the injuries that they've been dealing with. But if you want to bet on next week before they play tomorrow night, which I would not advise, you can get the Niners at minus 238 on the money line, and Cincinnati at plus 195 with a total of 46. Guys, how much is tomorrow night going to impact how you look at this game for next week? Let's start off with Stu.
Yeah, I think a lot of it for me really depends on the running game. For me, Christian McCaffrey is still questionable for tomorrow, but I don't know if I'm reading the tea leaves wrong here, but it's kind of looking like even with how banged up he is, that he might still pull through. But even if he doesn't, we're obviously looking ahead to next week. So the fact that he is that close does give me confidence that he'll be in there next week. I think that's the most important. That's how this team is built. It's on the run game, right? No matter who's back there. But we know Christian McCaffrey is obviously going to give them very efficient running, and he has that kind of MVP level ability that a Jordan Mason and Elijah Mitchell don't have off the bench. So for me, it's really about the rush game. If they can establish the run, then I think I'm going to like this 49ers team a lot.
Yeah, your question is how much does Monday Night Football impact this game? Honestly, I don't think much, because I think it's a game where San Francisco is going to do just enough to win tomorrow night. So for those who are listening and interested for Monday Night Football, I do lean Minnesota in that one, especially if you get 7 points. But I think San Francisco is going to do just enough to win. Maybe they cover backdoor, Kirk Cousins pick 6 at the end, something like that, right? But I think it's going to be competitive throughout. I think the game next week, and again, Joey B hasn't been great this season. Everybody knows that. He's been hurt. He was hobbled literally the first day of training camp, maybe the second day. He hasn't really truly recovered from that. But I think this game against San Francisco on the road is his opportunity to make a statement. Like, welcome to 2023-24 season, right? So I actually have a slight lean to Cincinnati. I like that it's less than 7. It's less than a touchdown here. We'll see, man, because we'll see really early on that, because you don't need to jump in on this line if you're not comfortable. But if you watch that game, you can definitely jump in at halftime.
So you like it right now at +6. What if San Francisco comes out tomorrow night and just, looks absolutely amazing? And
I hope San Fran wins 80-0 tomorrow, and it would make me love Cincinnati more. Like, you guys know how I handicap, right? Buy low, sell high. I mean, that's the perfect spot coming off a really amazing Monday night primetime game. Everybody's going to be on the Niners, and it's a home game next week again for them. All the signs point to San Fran, and those are the games that I like to look into.
Yeah, so San Francisco obviously 5-1 right now. Bengals at 3-3. So it's kind of a really important game for them as they move forward here. Yes, it's a very good team, but you can't be hovering around 500 in this AFC. There's a lot of good teams in the mix, and Cincy, they got to start making that run like they made last year and pile up some wins. So that's going to be a fun one. Let's talk about another team in the AFC North who had an incredibly fun game this week. The Cleveland Browns. They are 1.5-point dogs heading to Seattle, who looked kind of doo-doo today for my money. You get the Seahawks at -122 and the Browns at +102. So the dog pound dogs heading to Seattle at the moment, and the total at 41.5. The vaunted Browns defense making Gardner Minshew look like prime Brady with Randy Moss. I mean, it was unbelievable to watch that game today, but the Browns eke out that win 39-38. AC, what do we do with this one? Do we have to pounce on the Browns here as a dog? They're much better than what that we saw today against the Colts.
Yeah, this one's tough. My initial I'll defer to Stu here, but I think my initial read is actually Seattle here. I know it's -2.5. You're not getting the other side of a 3, right, which is a key number. But I personally didn't think that the Browns were that great. I know when I do my weekly power rankings, I left the Browns out of the top 5, and a few people mentioned how great their defense is. But to me, they played really weak offenses. And it's not like Seattle's a juggernaut offense, but they are a lot better at home offensively. And I think it's a good spot, again, to buy low on a team at home coming off a really bad loss. So I like Seattle -2.5 as my initial lean.
And I'll say the Seattle defense is looking good too. I mean, Witherspoon, I watched him again today. This kid is legit, right? That primetime game, you don't want to judge too much, but he's looked really strong. That increases what they can do with Tariq Woolen on the other side, what they can do with Love, the safety. I think the Seattle defense is a little underrated. I guess my biggest issue is that, to me, you kind of said at the beginning, Seattle looked disappointing to you. I don't know if disappointing is the right word. It just looked like they lacked energy. Like, to me, it looked like they clearly realized that they won that game in the first half, and the second half was just nothing. It was just, okay, let's coast along and finish this game out. Obviously, you won't be able to do that this week, but for me, this is an interesting line. I mean, I think it's going to continue to move in Seattle's favor. Cleveland, the quarterback play is kind of up in the air. Is Deshaun Watson going to be back? Is PJ Walker going to start again? And frankly, does it matter, right? I mean, both of these guys have been pretty equally dreadful so far this year as well. The running game, obviously, they started out with a huge touchdown right there, but that's still a big question mark for this team. So this is a weird one. I think this is an ugly one. I don't know about you guys. I think right after a lot of people got burned on the under, I think I might go right back to the under in this game. I know the Colts obviously was the most surprising over of the year right there, with both teams putting up 30+ points. But I think it might be a good pivot back to the under right here.
I don't mind it. I mean, Seattle is one of those teams that can randomly pop off, though, on offense. Like, remember that game last year with the Lions? I think they combined for like 200 freaking points. So I don't know. Unders scare me. Again, Sunday night, let's keep vibes high. We want scoring, baby. Screw the unders. All right, let's talk about the LA Rams taking on your Dallas Cowboys. They are 6-point dogs at the moment. Dallas minus 238 on the money line, and the Rams at plus 195. The total of 45, and the Rams losing that one today with the Steelers. But I think LA has been a lot better than we thought they were going to be this season. They clearly have pieces, and Dallas obviously having a bye this week. They're sitting at 4-2. So if you're Dallas, you really want to come out and assert your dominance against a team that you should be better than. And they're almost a touchdown favorite here. But I don't know if I like that right now. I don't know if I like Dallas at -6. I feel like the Rams can keep this thing close. I like what they have at receiver, the dink and dunk, and then, you find your guy in the seam and you go. I think they've kind of figured something out here, even though their record isn't all that great at 3-4. I don't know. I'm not ready to say that the Rams are a touchdown worse than the Cowboys, who have been dominant at times this year, but have had close games against teams that you probably didn't expect them to. So AC, let's give you the floor here first. What do you think about your Cowboys as 6-point favorites here at the moment?
Yeah, so the show is called Opening Line Report. If you are looking straight at the line, you don't look at, injuries, you don't look at past performance, you don't look at the Cowboys coming off a bye, any of that. If you look at straight line, this is a Rams play, 100% in my opinion. Cowboys got really lucky against the Chargers, covering that really short spread at -1.5. They won by 3. They now have an extra week of rest. Everything points to them dominating this team, right? They played in LA, but it was basically a road game against Pittsburgh. So no big deal there. And then they're going to travel to Dallas. I know Matthew Stafford has a big following in Dallas. He's from the Dallas area. But it's basically another road game for them. Everything points to a Dallas win by 2 touchdowns. But the line to me is squarely saying Rams. And if you want to trust the line, I think that the play here is going to be Los Angeles Rams. But I would say to wait, because I think this line would be moving to 6.5. I don't know if it'll probably touch 7 and then come back down to 6.5 is how I read it.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I've been a Rams fan, but I've also wanted no part of them as a favorite, right? I don't really like that world as the Rams covering numbers right here. So this is where I liked them. I like to target them as an underdog. I think that's where they thrive. The problem is I'm just sick and tired of betting the Rams against great defensive lines, because that's really the problem right here. When you give Stafford time to operate, when you let this McVay playbook play out a little bit more, that's when this team is really dangerous. When you get in their face, when you give them no time, when you take advantage of the subpar offensive line, that's when everything falls apart for the Rams. And I think that's going to be what happens here. I think the biggest thing is Parsons off of a bye week, right? That's a huge deal. He hasn't looked 100% these last couple of weeks. You really need him to be game breaking when you don't have Diggs in the secondary, right? You need him to be game breaking, and he hasn't been. And I think that's why their defense hasn't looked as elite. So hopefully coming off of that week will be a huge deal. The other final thing I want to note, I think the big deal moving on is Dallas, I think, can cover teams with one really good wide receiver really well. I'm not sure they'll be able to with 2, right? I think Bland is a very underrated corner. We already saw him step up. I think teams that only have one main target, for example, Keenan Allen last week and a guy like Joshua Palmer, I think that's where they contain a lot better. It'll be interesting to see if Puka is in that conversation now, or if he can really punish them for not being able to cover him, because it looked like he just did it this week, right? So I think that'll be a huge story to follow.
AC, can the Cowboys win the Super Bowl?
I think they can. I mean, they took a really, really big blow with Trayvon Diggs' injury. Stu mentioned it. But it's really going to depend on that defensive line. If Micah Parsons can play like a top 5 to top 3 defensive player in the NFL, and he has that potential, he just needs to stay consistent week in and week out and make an impact on the game throughout, right? Not just late, but throughout. Then yes, of course, right? And anytime you have a game breaker like that, you're going to have a legitimate chance. The NFC, in my opinion, I know people are super high on Philly. The Lions got rocked today. I think the NFC is kind of wide open, right? It's really just Philly, in my opinion. Maybe one or two other teams, but I think the Cowboys are right there in that second tier. And if you're in the top 3 or 4 teams in your conference, I think you have a chance. But I do want to mention another thing for this game. Stu talked about it, the wide receiver matchup. I think we're going to see a lot of Jordan Lewis in this game for Dallas, just because he's a smaller, quicker, agile guy to stay with the Cooper Kupps of the world and the Pukas of the world. Deron Bland is going to stay on the outside. So depending on the bigger wide receiver that goes outside, he'll probably tail him.
Let's talk about another team in the NFC East playing a team in the AFC East. They share a city. They both play football in New Jersey. The New York teams, the New York Football Jets, the New York Football Giants, they square off. It's always fun when these two teams play just because of the fan bases alone. For the last 15 years or so, it's been hard to see both of these teams being good at the same time. So when they play every 4 years, it's kind of like a good state of the union point for each squad. Giants, they had that success last year, but now they've kind of come back to earth, right? They've been hit or miss this year, dealing with a lot of injuries. Jets seemingly ticking upwards with that defense, young, exciting. They got good young players. Obviously, they're doing what they can with Zach Wilson at quarterback here. So I had to put this one in our marquee because of the brands alone. It's just fun. The Jets are 3-point favorites, which I was surprised by. I'm just surprised to see the Jets as a favorite at this point at more than 1.5 points. But here they are, a field goal favorite on the road against the Giants. You can get the Jets at -162 on the money line, the Giants at +136, and a low total of 36.5. So, Stu, what do I do with this game? Is this a stay away? I mean, the Jets at -3. Should I be all over the Giants as a dog here? But also, I don't want to bet on a banged up Giants team. I also hate the Giants. I hate both of these teams with fiery passion. So, Stu, tell me what I should do here.
Yeah, well, AC talks a lot about short favorites on the show. And to me, this does feel like one of those perfect spots where they would be that 1.5 point short favorite. But it's kind of to the point where the market has given that respect, right? They've given that bump to the full 3 points. And to me, that matters a lot. And I think I agree with them. I think that's kind of showing when you get to that 3, that's saying there's a tier gap between these two teams. And as ugly as it is to say, I think there is. I think that's true. I think this Jets defense is just too good. I don't think the Giants are going to be able to move the ball. And I kind of want to pose this question to you guys in a second, but is there a real QB controversy here? Is it just a season after Daniel Jones? Because to me, as a Jets backer this week, I would rather face Daniel Jones than I would Tyrod Taylor. And that's crazy.
Stu, you took my thunder away because for the time being, right, I think there is a controversy. Tyrod Taylor is playing well. He's getting that team in position to win. That's the important part, instead of just losing right off the bat, right? I think Daniel Jones obviously is their quarterback of the future for the next few years. They signed him to that long-term deal. But right now, it's kind of like a hot pitcher. You can't take him out until he loses. So I think Tyrod Taylor, even if Danny Dimes is healthy, is going to start until he loses. For this game in particular, I'm definitely staying away. That under is really, really enticing. 36.5. Two really bad offenses. Jets dominant defense. So I would lean the under there, but from a side perspective, I'm definitely going to stay away.
It's funny that we all kind of had secondary questions about quarterbacks ready, because I was going to ask, hypothetically, if you could have one quarterback to be your guy for the rest of this year and make a playoff run, would you pick Tyrod Taylor or Zach Wilson? That was going to be my question. And I think we'd all say Tyrod Taylor, right? But we're talking about Tyrod Taylor like he has the Giants on this incredible run here. They're not on an incredible run here, right? Like they're getting dubs, but I mean, Jesus, they are ugly.
Not an incredible run, though. I mean, I think winning is incredible with that team, with how bad they got Justin Pugh off of the street, and then another, right?
He has been running for his life.
Most recent call. Yeah, they added another guy before the game. To me, that's enough. Daniel Jones hasn't done that. The guy barely scored a first half touchdown so far this year. I mean, it's not even that close. Zach Wilson.
I just feel like we're rewarding mediocrity, you know?
But when you can do the most basic things in the NFL and you can put your team in a position to win, that's an underrated quality. That's why the Colt McCoys of the world stick around, because at the end of the day, these young guys that we draft that have absolute cannon arms, when you can't do anything with the talent, when you can't manage the line of scrimmage, then you're worthless. And that's why Zach Wilson won't be in the league by the end of the season, and Tyrod Taylor still will be.
Yeah, when it comes to the three quarterbacks we're talking in question, I mentioned it earlier. Tyrod just gives you a functional offense, right? You're not always at a disadvantage. Whereas Danny Jones, I mean, there are times where he shows flashes. I think when he runs, right, he's also super tough, right? We have to give him the fact that he gets hit all around, and he's always tough and trying to play, but he just doesn't read defenses quickly enough, and then just really bad turnovers. So, I mean, that's the difference between like a quarterback that is serviceable, someone like Colt McCoy, like Stu mentioned, and then versus someone like Jay Cutler, who had like all the talent in the world, super high ceiling, but his floor is so much lower because of the mistakes.
Let's do one more quarterback question here before we get to our last game. I want to pose this to Stu here. What's the deal with Sam Howell, man? Like, is he going to be your dude for the future here, or are we just looking at like the flash in the pan guy, and you know, by the end of the season maybe we're going to see someone else at the helm here for Washington? Because I mean, it's just a roller coaster ride every single week with this dude, and obviously you guys lost this week to the G-Men. So give us some thoughts on Sam Howell here. How am I supposed to look at this guy? Should I be betting on this guy prop wise? Should I be starting him in my super flex position in fantasy? Like, give me the Sam Howell skinny here.
Yeah, I mean, from fantasy, he's never going to be a terrible buy, because unlike the past couple of years with Ron Rivera, Eric Bieniemy has made this team a top 5 pass rate over expectation team, even in neutral game scripts, right? So even when they're ahead or in tie games, this team still passes at a top 5 rate with the Chiefs and the Bills of the world, which is insane to think about, right? But that's obviously what happens when you bring in an aggressive offensive coordinator. Unfortunately, it's not turning out, right? There's a reason there are only so many teams that pass this much, and they normally have elite quarterbacks, right? And Washington doesn't. So I would say from a real life perspective, there's a huge problem. It's the sack rate. A lot of the guys at PFF over the last couple of years have been doing a lot of good work. That sack rate is more of a quarterback stat than it is an offensive line stat. And it's one that's sticky from team to team, right? We see that follow players. What concerns me is when you see a trait with a prospect that is never improved upon throughout any point in their career, that's a huge problem, right? And Sam Howell isn't a 21-year-old kid. We've seen him be sacked at an extremely above average rate every single year of his college career. It was never fixed. It actually got marginally worse, and people blamed the offensive line, but he was still putting up awful sack numbers before that. So while the Washington offensive line isn't good, Sam Howell, I mean, he's dancing back there. He's got happy feet instantly. He's shook, and that's leading to a lot of sacks that aren't just on the offensive line. They're on him. So I have a hard time seeing that skill improve on. To me, I kind of comped him to Baker Mayfield. That's a guy I saw him as very similar to. Maybe not the highest ceiling in the world, but he can make consistent throws. The arm talent's there, and he does manage the game at an NFL level. The problem is just the sack rate. If we can never get this under control, then there's not really a path to being an NFL starter. And Baker had this problem at the beginning of his career. He's curbed it a little bit, but you're not a number 1 pick, Sam Howell. You don't get the Baker Mayfield 8 years of treatment, right? This is likely one of your last shots. So it's a tough question, right? Do you go into next year trying to draft a quarterback? It depends on how bad they are, I think, to be honest. If they fall in that top 10 pick range, I could see them drafting a quarterback. But to be honest, as a Commanders fan, I don't see Sam Howell as the quarterback of the future. I see him as a stopgap quarterback, similar to a Kenny Pickett in Pittsburgh.
Another just stray at Kenny Pickett there on the end.
I would take Howell over Pickett personally.
I thought you were going to throw out one of the many stopgap quarterbacks that Washington has had in our lifetime as an example, but you had to just take a
well, I
Kenny
wanted
Pickett
people,
taking a strike.
yeah, I wanted people to know that it's being a stopback quarterback in the NFL isn't bad. It just means you are the bridge to the team's long-term solution. And in the NFL,
how long
right
is
now,
Washington's bridge right now?
Oh,
this has got to be one of the this is from Joe Theismann to, we had a little detour to RG3 until his knee fell apart. Yeah. We never really had a true landmass with Kirk Cousins, right? Because it was just the franchise tag after the franchise tag. So, like, when are we going to get our?
You got to throw the 20-year Snyder era out. Like, that doesn't even count, right? To be honest, to be fair to them, to be fair to Stu, at least now they're not charging for training camp practices.
What a joke of a franchise, man. Speaking of a joke of a franchise, I'm like legitimately mad at the Detroit Lions. What was that today? Seriously, just forfeit. Don't show up. That was an absolute embarrassment. Yes, I am getting loud because I lost money and fantasy because of the Detroit Lions today. That was pitiful. It looked like they did not prepare for that football game. I don't know what happened. It just was awful. So they go out, they have this amazing game last week. They're riding high. They got the 5 wins. Yeah, look at us. Detroit's legit. And then they go to Baltimore and get stomped. It was ugly. And now they're 9.5-point favorites hosting the Raiders, who, look, they got Brian Hoyer playing quarterback in all likelihood, right? Or maybe it's going to be Aiden O'Connell, but I think it's going to be Brian Hoyer. And the Raiders haven't had a great season, right? But we know they have talent. And you got Detroit, who we thought was awesome. And then they looked like the Detroit of old today. And now we're going to give them a 9.5-point line? Like, what are we doing here? And they're minus 355 on the money line. The Raiders at plus 280. The total is 44.5. I'm going to get all over the Raiders here, I personally. And I think that this could trend lower. Like, I think that they could be like a 7.5-point dog by the time this game starts, because Detroit was exposed today in a big way. So, AC, I'll let you have the floor here first. What am I to make of the Detroit Lions after what I saw today? Because I threw up a few times.
I think the line's already adjusted. I think the line has been moving to the Raiders. So you read it correctly, Tommy. I would say my favorite play in this one is going to be the over. It's at 45 right now, I believe. So I think that's a little outdated. It's 45. I think Detroit can score 45 by themselves in this game, to be honest. I think it's a great spot for them. Monday Night Football, they get an extra day of rest coming off a terrible, like you said, embarrassing loss. Prime time. They don't get very many primetime games in Detroit. So it's going to be rocking. I think that whole narrative is going to be, that whole night is going to be about like, oh, Detroit's back on Monday Night Football. They're a 5-2 team, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm not going to touch the line because 9.5, that side of 10 to me sometimes reeks of a backdoor cover for Vegas. So I'm going to go the over here, 45. I think, like I said, I think Detroit can get at least 30 by themselves.
Yeah, for me, I think that game was a little bit of a window, a little bit of a small little peek at the future on what a Detroit playoff game will look like. And I'm very sad that everybody got to see it this early. The good news is that people will obfuscate, they'll make excuses, and we have plenty of time to forget what we just saw, which is what Detroit is going to look like when, push comes to shove and you got to go play Baltimore outdoor in the wind. You got to play one of the best defensive coordinators in the league. Shit gets serious real fast. I like Detroit as much as the next guy. I'm sorry, PFF. Jared Goff is not the best quarterback in the league. He's not particularly close because the best quarterback in the league has to elevate his team when no one else is able to. And there, to be completely honest, it's seemingly only 1 or 2 quarterbacks in the league that can do that right now. So I do not like Detroit down the line. And I'm glad a lot of people will find a lot of good ways to make excuses for this come playoff time. That being said, I like them in this game. I'm going to take them in this game because this is a regular season team, and this isn't a playoff game they're going to have to be playing right here. They're going to have to be playing a very bad Raiders team that will not be able to move the ball. On the other side, they have one guy you got to worry about on defense, Max Crosby, one-man wrecking crew. Going up against one of the best offensive lines in the league, they're going to be able to nullify him better than most teams will. They're going to be able to play their ball right here. I don't think Las Vegas is going to be able to score with a backup quarterback. Maybe I'd be on the Vegas side with Jimmy Garoppolo, but I think there's a very big gap between Jimmy Garoppolo and a Brian Hoyer. I know a lot of people may not necessarily give Jimmy G that kind of credit, but yeah, this team reminds me of the Utah Jazz when they had Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. I'll take them in the regular season 10 out of 10 times. But when it gets serious come playoff time, that's where things start to fall apart.
I almost feel like you're giving the Lions too much credit to compare them to Spida and Rudy Gobert. Honestly, I'm just so mad at them. I'm so mad at them. That was gross today. And I think you hit the nail on the head, man. When this team plays a real team that's going to punch you in the mouth, Jared Goff goes ahead and looks like pre-Sean McVay Jared Goff again. That's what we saw today. Like, I have done a full heel turn on the Detroit Lions after that today. And yes, I did lose money. So maybe that's me talking with my wallet. AC, before we give you a second here to talk about the World Series, not the World Series, the ALCS, hopefully the World Series for your team. Anything further for you on the Lions?
Oh man, the Lions. So I was on the Ravens today, thank goodness. So I'm not
good
as
for
mad.
you.
Yeah, I'm not as mad as Tommy. Me and Stu were on the right side there. It felt like a preseason game. I think they were what 35-0, right?
Honestly, I may just kick you off the broadcast now. So.
No, but this is the great spot. I mean, I mentioned this every single week. Sell high, buy low. This is the perfect buy low spot but with one of the best offenses in the regular season, right? That's just the truth, right? Detroit can score a ton. They have a lot of great weapons, especially if Gibbs is able to go next week. So I do like the Lions, but I like the over more because, again, I think they can just cover the over by themselves. The Vegas defense, Stu mentioned it, it's just max. So if Detroit wants to, they can definitely pour it onto.
Max Crosby is so good, man. That guy's very fun to watch play football. All right, Rangers, Astros, Game 7. Who you got? What are you doing here, AC?
Yeah,
well, as a fan, who you got? Like,
it's
don't.
Tough,
I don't even
man. It's tough because Max Scherzer is not 100%. We know that, and in my opinion, Christian Javier is Houston's best pitcher. So, I mean, better than Verlander, definitely better than Framber. So, Christian Javier has dominated Texas now for the last 2 years. The best thing that's going for this game for Texas is that it's not in Texas. It's on the road in Houston. Houston doesn't play well at home, and Texas plays better on the road. I'm just going to go out and say Texas, wins it in Game 7, and we'll play the Phillies in the World Series.
Stu, you have a thought?
Oh man, he kind of killed it right there. Javier, obviously, as a Nationals fan, though, man, my heart is screaming Max Scherzer, man. That guy went to war for my team so many times. I know he can reach into those places that not many other players in the world can reach into, and for that reason, I'm going to be putting my money on the Rangers. I want to be there with you, man. I love Scherzer. I'm hoping Javier looks a little bit more like he did in the regular season, right, than he has so far in the postseason. And I hope my guy Mad Max comes out there throwing heat tomorrow.
He's truly a crazy person. All right, AC, good luck to your boys. I will not be here next week, but you guys will be here. So hopefully your Rangers are still playing baseball when we have the show next week here. AC, good chatting with you as always, buddy.
Thank you again, and congratulations, Tommy.
Thank you, baby. The ring, it's still on after a year, so that's a win. All right, we'll talk next week, AC. All right, Stu, it is time for the early look at prop leans here. Obviously, these markets aren't available just yet, but in looking at the matchups for next week and with the incredible base of knowledge you have, where are some spots that people should be targeting once they can start betting on the leans for the props for next week's slate?
Yep, one immediately jumps out to me. You see that Commander's flag behind me. I'm going to Brian Robinson Jr. And unfortunately for me, it is not going to be the over. It's going to be the under on his rushing yards. He went under his rushing yards against the Eagles last week. This is the best rush defense in football. If you weren't watching prime time before the live stream right here, you could see Raheem Mostert, one of the top running backs in the league in terms of both efficiency and touches, felt the wrath of that defense. And honestly, when you look at it last week, the rookie Chris Rodriguez Jr. was getting involved in the carries game. That's never good, right? When the fourth round rookie is starting to eat into your carries as a change of pace back, that is the exact same physical build as the starter. That's not good news for the starter. Good news is most people didn't watch that game. Most people don't give a shit about 4 or 5 carries for Chris Rodriguez Jr., so they won't buy into that. I think his number is going to be overvalued. I only see him getting about 9 carries in this one, and I think his number is probably going to be around 50. So I think we're going to get extremely good value right there. And before we exit this game, I'll say DeAndre Swift on the other side. Washington's rush defense has unfortunately not looked super good recently. We've seen a bunch of teams take advantage. Saquon Barkley, even despite getting banged up in that game, had a pretty solid one. We've seen running backs have a lot of success. So I like DeAndre Swift. Luckily, these two teams cashed earlier this season. He also went over his rushing yards number in that one. We just saw him had a pretty solid performance on prime time as well. So I like those 2 rushing totals right here. I'll mention one more. We talked about it earlier. I didn't get enough time to jump back in about why I like San Francisco. I wanted to hop back in.
Give it to me, baby.
Yeah, there was some Browns talk, but I like that team because I like their running back. Whoever it is, if it's CMC, I'll be on CMC in that game. If it's Elijah Mitchell, hey, I've got him on all my fantasy teams. I love the guy as well. I think the 49ers established the run. We've seen the Bengals suck on the ground so far this year. Bottom 5 explosive rush rate, bottom 5 yards after contact. Those are not 2 statistical categories you want to be bad at against the 49ers. This is a yak team. The whole world is going to come out in that game, and they're going to tell you the same thing. It's going to be those boring mainstream points. Oh, look, the Bengals are off of a bye. They're going to be healthy. Joe Burrow is now a week healthy, right? If this isn't a lingering calf issue that's bothered him all year long, he'll look a little bit better, sure, but I don't still think that puts him in a position to beat the 49ers. And most importantly, it's not like that's something the market doesn't take into account. The people that set the lines are perfectly aware that this is a bye week team with a healthier quarterback. The good news is their coach sucks. Even with a bye week, I trust Zach Taylor significantly less than I do Kyle Shanahan on a short week coming in with his B- game plan. All that being said, I think CMC has a huge game. I think he obviously finds himself in the end zone once again. And if he's healthy out there, he should clobber his rush yards number.
Brian Robinson, it was interesting you mentioned him because I feel like the dude really knows how to get in the end zone, but the I almost called them their former team name. Washington just, it feels like they're very content with having the committee because they like to have certain guys do certain things within that offense. And I don't know. I feel like if Brian Robinson was just told, hey, you can be the guy, here you go, I think he could do it. Like, I think he has the skill set. He has the body to take the hits. I don't know. If I was a Washington fan, I feel like I would be frustrated knowing how good that dude is, and he just doesn't maybe get the touches that he should and could dominate. But I'll cede the floor to you on that one. That's just me as an outsider, watching bits and pieces of every game. I'm like, feel like he's just a really good football player,
Yeah, I think my theory is the archetype of running back he is falling out of favor in the NFL right now because he's a bruiser, but he's not a top-end Derrick Henry kind of bruiser. To me, he profiles in the Ezekiel Elliott category of guy where the top-end explosive speed isn't there. I'm not talking about Zeke from this year. I don't think he's reached prime Zeke because that was obviously a high-end draft pick right there. But I think he's kind of close to that mold. I think he's the guy that he gives you the extra 2-3 yards at the end of every carry. The problem is last year we saw him in that 17 carry a game role, and he was injured. And that really hampered his efficiency. I was a big critic of him as well. He looks a lot better this year. He's just getting, like you said, half of the opportunity as last year. And I was very surprised that this team is throwing so much, like we talked about earlier. So I agree. I think Brian Robinson's a very solid running back. I don't think he's a top end guy. I wouldn't want to give him the ball 18 times on a regular basis, but I think he should live in that 14 to 16 carry range. And I think, like you said, the fact that he's at 8, 7, 6 right now is kind of a bad sign for this offense.
Yeah, I need to get on the phone with Eric Bieniemy immediately. All right. That is going to do it for the OddsTrader opening line report. Go ahead and download the OddsTrader app, Apple, Android. Check us out on oddstrader.com. It is the best in class predictive sports betting AI in the business. You use us, you're going to make money. It's just a fact. That's what we do here. We are here to help you be a better. So go ahead, download the app, poke around, and make sure you're checking in before you place your bets here. Use our broadcast, use our AI, and make your decisions accordingly. I will not be here next week. Stu will be back. AC will be back. Maybe his Rangers will be playing. Maybe they won't. Either way, we will talk football. That's what we do here on the opening line report. That's going to do it for week 8. Next week, the boys will talk with you about week 9. I'm Tommy FreezePops. That's Stu. Signing off. Go Pats.